Hello, welcome. Today we're going to go over carriers and the fact that they seem to have been buffed quite a bit. So the first major change to carriers is that time zones don't matter anymore. Prior to By Blood Alone, carriers launched 3 sorties a day in line with land-based aircraft. This meant depending on where you were in the world, there were naval regions where you would only launch 1 sortie a day with your naval bombers, as opposed to other regions where you'd launch 2. For example, the Western Mediterranean actually only launched 1 sortie a day prior to By Blood Alone, because the sorties happen at 4 a.m., noon, and then 8 p.m. In the Western Mediterranean, it is considered night at 4 a.m. and at 8 p.m., so it would only launch 1 sortie a day. That has been changed now. Carriers now launch sorties every 3 hours rather than every 8, which means worst case scenario, you will launch a minimum of 4 sorties a day. To offset that, the bonus that carrier fighters was 5, now it is 1. What this means is that fighters in naval battles are not shooting down nearly as many planes as they used to. Combat damage scale only applies to fighters. The naval strike carrier multiplier was not changed. Carrier naval bombers do an insane amount of damage, but the fighters do nothing. They basically sneeze on the enemy naval bombers and that's it. So first things first, actually, let's talk about the designs we could potentially be using. So first thing you need to do is you need to determine, does range matter to you? Within the naval battle itself, range does not matter. So you can slap on dive brakes for the improved targeting and then 2 armor plates, and the fact that you've only got 600 range does not matter. Now, if you don't expect to get shot at, you can remove the 2 armor plates. You lose 8 defense, but you save yourself 2 IC. Makes your naval bombers a little bit more replaceable. I don't think having high armor plating is a bad thing because it's not that expensive and you're still potentially going to run into enemy fighters, and having 8 more air defense will help you not get shot down, even if the enemy fighters aren't doing their 5 times damage that they used to. Now, the other option is putting heavy machine guns on your naval bomber and still have it be able to take off. So this gives you air attack. What is the benefit to this? Well, technically they should shoot back any fighter that tries to hit them and theoretically shoot at any naval bomber as well. In practice, not really though. They tend to either do one mission or the other. They're more likely to do the naval strike mission, but if you put up a 50-50 split, 50% fighters, 50% naval bombers, and you put one side with naval bombers with guns, one side without guns, the side without guns wins like 4 to 5 times. And it's just like they don't seem to attack as frequently. I mean, I can show you. So to start off with, I have to recreate a save because I accidentally saved over it. This one was my testing for 4v4 carrier combat, except for now it's nothing. These fleets are just generic fleets. They are 10 battle cruisers, 10 heavy cruisers, 10 light cruisers, 100 destroyers. They're just fleets that are maybe represent what you might start with, and they're both the same for each side. So on the French side here, we have naval bombers, and these do have air attack. I've put heavy machine guns on them. If we go back over to the English side, they don't. There is no air attack on these naval bombers. They are otherwise identical though. And if we let them engage, so if we watch them fight, we will see 2 things. One, we will see that naval bombers are not getting shot down. The fighters, they are not doing anything. We have 90 fighters here. They've shot down 3 naval bombers. On the enemy side, they shot down 4 planes combined before they've run out of work. And this is a tendency that tends to happen. The side with naval bombers with guns tends to get their carriers deorged first. Once the carriers are deorged, you'll see on the other side that the damage just starts racking up because there's nothing to contest them. I'm going to turn off weather while we're at night here, and I'm going to swap on one thing. The British get a special carrier, CAG night fighting. This did not used to work prior to By Blood Alone. They introduced it, but it did nothing. So let's turn weather back on. I just wanted to get rid of the storm. See, now on the tooltip, night times 50%, base minus 150% carrier night traffic. That is a pretty big bonus. Considering half the day is night, that means you get to do 50% during the night. By base, it means you do nothing. With this, it means you do half the damage, which means you're effectively getting an extra strike a day, or a 50% increase in your damage output from using this. And only the British get it. No one else gets this. Also, now that they're down to only screens, we can showcase the fact that there is no naval targeting based on ship type. Carriers don't have difficulties hitting destroyers. If we look at this battle result, we can see the pure amount of damage they're doing, and a lot of these are small ships right at the end of that battle. The size of the ship does not influence the ability of a naval bomber to hit it. It influences whether or not the naval bomber is going to target it. Carriers have the highest weight, and we can see this in the defines. It's also on the wiki. What what this is a multiplier to your HP. So everything's base weight to be targeted is their HP. Carriers, their HP gets multiplied by 200. What this means is that if you're going for a carrier-based build, which is very viable, especially if you have land-based aircraft nearby and you can get yourself green air, which will give the enemy red air, which means even if they have naval bombers, they won't do anything, you're going to want heavy cruisers. If you're using this heavy cruiser design, you can afford 2 for every 1 battleship there is. And if you don't put AA on them, your weight is going to be increased by 25. So you're getting 21% more weight for about the same cost. So if we go back to our original save, I just showed you that in the first combat, naval bombers with guns don't win versus naval bombers without guns. And that's just a demonstration because I've done this multiple times and no guns just tends to win. 100% naval bombers, no guns beats basically everything. So then the question is guns versus no guns, and that's a coin flip. At which point, why waste the IC? So no guns on naval bombers on your carriers. As for the other option, taking a carrier fighter of some design and putting a torpedo on it, this doesn't work. If it worked, it'd be utterly broken because carrier fighters always take off regardless of the carrier overstacking penalty. So this fighter, if you also put on a dive brake, would be as good as any naval bomber you could design, and it would always fly. However, it doesn't work. Carrier cast, just don't bother. I have a carrier cast design just for one very specific thing where you play around with getting the maximum number of naval bombers in a battle as possible, and I will show you that. So here I have 6 carriers. If we do the math, 6 carriers gives you a 40% penalty, which means you're allowed to use 60% of your air wings. But here's the thing, fighters always work, but fighters also suck. But what you can do is you can bring an extra full carrier worth of air wings. So if you want to use 5 carriers of full naval bombers, you need to bring 8.33 air wings. That rounds up, which means you can have 4 carriers with 1 air wing type on it, 1 carrier with 2 air wing types on it, and 1 carrier with 3 air wing types on it, which is what I have set up here. So we've got pure naval bombers on the top 4. We've got 1 fighter and 50 naval bombers on the next one, and then just bringing a naval bomber, carrier fighter, and then a carrier cast. And what this allows us to do is use all 5 of the first carriers at full efficiency, even though they're just using naval bombers. This might mess things up. I need to delete this. It's in the wrong order because it should work top down. So if I can just redeploy that, and it's still going to the top. Oh, that's not good. This is being really weird because down here, it is deploying in the right order, the order we need it to, and then up here it's deciding to do it in the other order. Because it's not even alphabetical based on air wing number. There is a way around this though. We'll just swap carriers. So the carrier order is determined by when the carrier is added. So if we just split this carrier off and put it back in, it'll now be at the bottom. So the one that isn't working properly will be at the bottom, and then everything will be fine. And now it's at the bottom. Anyways, now that we've messed around with it and it works, let's tag to the French, and we're not going to send out their carriers. We're just going to send out the rest of their fleet, because otherwise their carriers are potentially going to naval strike and it's going to mess things up. So here we can see that the 5 carriers all launched. That's what we want to see. That is allowing us to bring effectively a full carrier worth of naval bombers, because you only need the 1 extra air wing, and because we've got the carriers, we're just going to completely destroy them because they didn't get to bring their carriers. Now, how well does this actually work? Well, let's just reload and send out the French carriers this time. And now let's see how this combat goes. So the British got a little lucky. Their carrier that only has fighters on it got hit, which means all of their naval bombers are operating at full efficiency, and they got doubly lucky because the first strike targeted primarily enemy aircraft carriers. So this is abnormally well for the British. I did swap out 2 battle cruisers to give them the extra 2 carriers, which I think is a fair IC trade. And then, once you've got just the carriers, you're just going to completely annihilate. And then you just end up with a stupid amount of damage on your carrier naval bombers. If we go look at the English, I didn't train my naval bombers before this battle. They all still have no experience. Do I think it is necessary to use 6 carriers? No. But if you're going to use carriers, don't bother with fighters. The only reason you need fighters is to allow yourself to use more naval bombers if you want to go over 4. It is not really feasible to use a stupid amount of carriers anymore. If you want 7 operational carriers, you need 35 air wings, which really means that you need 10 extra carriers that are just there to have 3 air wings on them. I mean, you could do that. Take your starting cruisers, convert them to carriers so that you can have 7 operational, and then you also have 10 meat shields trying to protect other carriers. I don't really think that's worth it. That's a lot of extra work. The Pacific Fleet guy got nerfed. It only gives +1 deck size now. Previously, it used to give plus 20% deck size, which would have been the equivalent of 2 air wings for the 1940 model. Now it's only giving 1. So now you really got to consider whether or not that's worth it for you. But otherwise, do you care about the 1 deck size, or do you care about just making it cheaper so that you can produce other ships? Over 5 carriers, you're losing 5 air wings, but you're saving 25% of the cost doing that. I think they inadvertently buffed the Coastal Defense Fleet designer. Anyways, I want to thank you for watching. I'm going to set up a challenge, and maybe I'll review some submissions for this, and I don't know how I'd go about doing that. I'll maybe make a post in the community tab when I figure that out. There was a person who set up a Royal Navy challenge prior to By Blood Alone, and let's just back out and I'll explain it a little bit easier if we just restart as the British with their starting fleet. So the idea was the British start with basically the largest fleet in the game. So the challenge was relatively simple. You take the starting British fleet, and I'm going to include everything in production. We're going to finish 1 of everything in production, excluding subs. We don't care about subs. Merge it up, and you have to build a fleet that will beat this. And the point of the challenge is to see how little IC you can spend to defeat this fleet. And I think I'm going to do a live stream about this sometime tonight, probably 7 p.m. EST. This is a well-balanced fleet. Anyways, thank you for watching. I will see you guys later tonight if you guys want to show up for the live stream. Link is in the description.